We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
It's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
And welcome everyone to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's hour. And this is now session 6 of series 19. I can hardly believe I'm saying that. And we're joined by Dr. Sally Wilson and Jenny Stevenson this evening. And because we always do this, we would like to know their moment of the week and whether they can share it with us. Shall I start with Sally? Sally, your moment of the week.
Thank you, Sue. My 11-year-old was in the Wales Eisteddfod over the last week, so I got to watch her compete on stage at the Eisteddfod, so that was good fun, singing and dancing.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. How did she do?
They did all right. They came second in their category in Wales, so so proud of them.
That was lump in the throat moment, wasn't it, Sally?
Yeah, definitely.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Okay. Now, can you compete, Jenny?
No, my nothing that exciting. No, my son had his birthday on Sunday, so he turned 14. So that was my moment of the
Wow.
week. Yeah,
14. Are you sure he wasn't 4?
I
You
know,
were far too young.
I know. Yeah,
Did he still have birthday cake with candles? Or
he
was it a
did.
Colin Caterpillar?
No, I made his cake and
Wow.
candles. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, I bet that was grand. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your moment. Now, we're just going to just remind people where we came from. And I always think of this because it's, as I said right at the beginning, this was series 19. And it's now 6 years ago we started the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And it was really at the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdown, the first one in the UK. And we realised that because midwives and student midwives obviously couldn't meet outside the clinical area at study days, conferences, festivals, whatever, that we needed some way of connecting people and giving them information and making them feel connected anyway. And so we started the Maternity and Midwifery, and we started at first with quite a lot about COVID and quite a lot about caring for self, and a lot about what services were doing and education was doing to deal with COVID, which was what people really wanted to know, because they wanted to share, if they were doing something really good, other people could take it on in their locality. And I remember that though it was a very scary time, it was also quite exciting to hear that midwives and student midwives doing all sorts of things to deal with the situation and try and make sure women and babies and families were cared for. So it was a very weird time. Anyway, we carried on and we're still going with the every week being here, but we're obviously not talking quite so much about COVID. We're talking about general issues within maternity and midwifery and issues that are important to midwives and student midwives and people who are working in the maternity community, and also mums if they want to join in as well. We welcome mums coming in and dads. Oh, okay, we're not, anybody can come and join us. You just need to register. Because the other thing is, and I always need to remember this, is all of the maternity and midwifery material is recorded. So if you should have a power cut or you want to really look at this whole podcast, and you will want to, I'm sure, you will have access to that, and we'll send you a recording of this, and also you'll be able to access it in a podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and also through the newsletter, which will come out on Thursday, I think. So you can access the link there and actually catch up with if you've missed anything or you want to just rethink about something. And we're very keen for you to share. For those of you who are students and for those of you who are midwives, you might want to share this with colleagues, because there'll be things here that are interesting and they're new things and things maybe you haven't always thought about. And so having a chance maybe to sit down over coffee and talk about what you've learned is a really good thing. We're very happy to share. And at this point, I'll also say to you, look after yourselves, because that's very much underpinning what we do on the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. The other thing is that if you want to access anything from Maternity and Midwifery Forum, you can do through Matflix, which is on your list of resources, which is accessible today. And you'll see there's some interesting links of things that you can go and have a look at. And Matflix is one of those. Now, if you're doing any projects or dissertations or essays for college or university, this is a very good place to get hot information, really good pieces of research, practice development, that sort of thing. I do have a health warning on this, because once you go into the Matflix and start looking and listening to some of the speakers, you get very hooked and suddenly 2 hours has gone. So beware of that. It's very good, and it's a very good way of learning. So that's just my health thing. Okay, I'm just going to do a little news feature, and this, I think the big news, and I think within maternity care within the UK, the big news at the moment has been a panorama programme that was played on Monday on the maternity services, focusing very much on care and outcomes in Nottingham, where there's been a review of cases from 2012 to 2024, I should say. This part of what Donna Ockenden is reviewing, and I think the review is being published in the summer. And I found it it was very heartbreaking, really, because you had these parents who had terrible experiences, had lost their babies, who'd been very sick, and they hadn't necessarily been given correct information. And they really wanted information about what had happened, to understand what had happened, as well as having to deal with grieving for their babies, which was very, as I said, heartbreaking. There was also a senior midwife talking about the problems from the midwifery side of not having enough staff and a culture that was not working very well at that point. And how mothers and babies were put at risk because of lack of staff and equipment. And I found it very difficult watching as a midwife. And you know how you watch something on midwifery and you start shouting at the TV. I'm afraid I did shout at the TV a bit. And I suppose I was most shocked at accounts of midwives being told not to be kind to women because otherwise they come back, which is what we'd normally want people to do. And it included some unacceptable abbreviations that were used on boards to say to basically what midwives were thinking about those people. And I'm sure it was only one or two people, but bad enough. I couldn't repeat what it was about, but you'll see if you watch the programme, you'll see, and I put a link on the resources. And it really underlined for me the importance of listening to women and parents and what they have to say and what they're, if they're saying they're in pain, and really take account of that and explaining if you're saying to a woman, maybe stay at home a little bit longer. Why are you saying that? What will she get out of being at home for that little bit longer? And if she needs to come in, she needs to come in. And that sort of reiterated it for me. I was really heartened by the strength of the parents. They were fantastic people who really worked through their grief a bit, still holding it as well. And it's a testament to them and their lost babies. And the other thing is, having looked at what the trust have been doing, they have been acting, that's also very reassuring for mums and midwives in the system. And the Nottingham Trust exec did say, we've got a lot more to do here at Nottingham, but we'll not stop until we get things right. We're learning from our mistakes, we're improving the safety of our care, and we're listening to our mothers, and we're talking to our staff. I can see improvements, and I do believe we have a safer, kinder and better led maternity service. So I think it's useful to have a look at the programme and look at it very critically and see if there's anything of that sort going on in your unit. And there might be, I hope not, but be aware of the effect on mums and families and other midwives and students. Now, I think I'm almost on perfect time. Yes, I am on almost perfect time. We're kind of now moving into postpartum psychosis, also known as, and I used to think it was puerperal psychosis, which is a very important condition, which impacts on women and their families after the birth of a baby. And we're really pleased to be joined by Sally Wilson and Jenny Stevenson, sharing what's known about postpartum psychosis, its recognition, and how families can be supported through this, and how we'll explore women and families' experiences and some of the issues faced by those who experience postpartum psychosis. So I'm going to introduce both Sally and Jenny together because they're kind of going to do a nice little double act, which always works very well, like a chat. And if you have questions as they're talking, jot them down or put them in the little chat box, and then they'll come through. And I'm looking over here because they'll come through to this screen and we can discuss this after they've done their presentation. So we are delighted to welcome Dr. Sally Wilson, who's National Training Coordinator for Action on Postpartum Psychosis, and she coordinates APP, and that's the Association for postnatal psychosis workforce training and expert by experience talks for health professionals across the UK. She was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis herself in 2015 after the birth of a daughter and spent time in a general psychiatric ward. Her background includes research and lecturing in health and exercise sciences at Bangor University, and her research interests include approaches to improve quality of life in people with chronic illnesses and trialling novel ways to increase research in healthcare settings. And then Jenny Stevenson, who is a National Peer Support Coordinator, coordinates APP's online peer support, managing APP's forum, email support and video call support services. She became a volunteer peer supporter in 2014. Before working for APP, Jenny was an NHS manager and suffered from postpartum psychosis a bit out of the blue 3 weeks after the birth of her son in 2012 and spent a month on a mother and baby unit. And finding the APP network and online peer support forum played a key role in her recovery and helped support her and her husband in planning the second pregnancy. So welcome to Sally and Jenny. Thank you so much for coming this evening. The screen is now yours.
Thank you, Sue, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us and having us here today. I was going to introduce myself, but I don't need to. So yeah, my name's Sally, and we've also got Jenny here, who we're going to do a bit of a double act tonight. So Action on Postpartum Psychosis is the national charity, and we support families affected by postpartum psychosis, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what we do as a charity. As Sue said, I had postpartum psychosis in 2015. And at the time, there were no specialist perinatal mental health or mother and baby unit services where I lived. And eventually I accessed the treatment that I needed, which was medication and electroconvulsive therapy, lots of psychological and peer support. So I'm not going to tell my story today because we've got the lovely Jenny here to share her story. But I did just want to highlight the incredible midwives who cared for me and advocated for me when I started to develop postpartum psychosis on the postnatal ward. I wouldn't be here talking to you all today without them, so I just wanted to say a big thank you to you incredible midwives. So just to start with, I'm going to talk through what we know about postpartum psychosis. So we know that it's a severe, can be very frightening for both the families and the health professionals involved, postnatal mental illness. It has a very rapid onset and is considered a medical emergency or psychiatric emergency. So it can come on very quickly. A woman can go from being very well to being very poorly within a couple of hours. But it is treatable and people can make a recovery. And I think that's the main message that we want you to take away from today, is that it's very treatable with the right support, and people can make a recovery from postpartum psychosis. We'll talk a little bit about two kind of populations today of people. So we know that those with a history of severe mental illness, such as bipolar or previous psychosis or postpartum psychosis, they're at a higher risk of developing PP. But we also know that in about half the cases, it happens completely out of the blue. So we found in our APP work and surveys that about 50% of people who experience postpartum psychosis had no previous history of serious mental illness. So I think the key message there is that it can affect anyone who gives birth across, lots of different backgrounds, cultures, education levels, countries. So it really can happen to anyone equally across different kind of backgrounds. We also know that it affects about 1 to 2 in 1,000 births. So that's approximately 1,200 in the UK each year. And I guess what you can do is you can look at your birth rates within your hospital or your NHS trust, and you can work out roughly how many cases you might see within your hospital or your trust over the year. And I guess it's much more severe than, although it's less common, it is much more severe than other perinatal mental illnesses. And what we found in APP that we need to kind of increase the awareness of postpartum psychosis. So we found in some surveys that we've done that about 40% of the general population had heard about postpartum psychosis, but then only about 6% of expectant parents have information about PP in their antenatal classes. And what we consistently hear in APP from lived experience voices is that if they'd heard about it, if they'd known about the signs and symptoms, then they could have got help more quickly. So we know that by increasing awareness, it can help to save lives, but it can also reduce that trauma associated with the illness as well by getting help more quickly. So we've created some resources, some antenatal toolkits, which you can find on our website, but Sue's going to put them in the resources as well. And these are designed to have conversations with expectant parents, and also there's a leaflet to help health professionals to have those conversations. And it's really about how do we start to have those conversations, because we fully acknowledge that you're very busy, you've got so much to cover within those kind of antenatal sessions. You don't want to scare parents and expectant parents. It can be a scary thing talking about perinatal mental illness. So it's just some tips and tricks on how to start to have those conversations, just a couple of minutes of that kind of life-saving conversation, really. So within those resources, it talks about the signs and symptoms. So I'm just going to talk you through what we know about those kind of early signs and symptoms, and then the ones that we can go on and we recognise quite easily. So postpartum psychosis the first kind of signs really is mixed mood. So that can be feeling very high or very elated, very happy, but mixed in with feeling frightened or scared, tearful, lots of confusion, lots of racing thoughts, unable to sleep or lack of sleep, and then eventually leading to unusual beliefs and hallucinations. So seeing, hearing and sensing things that others can't, so that aren't real. And what we found in APP is that there are definitely early signs and symptoms before that full-blown kind of psychosis occurs. So these early signs and symptoms can come on very quickly and they can change very rapidly. So, for example, a woman can appear quite lucid in front of a health professional for sort of 10 to 15 minutes and feel okay. And then that can rapidly change to feeling quite poorly and having these hallucinations and delusions. And I guess the other thing really is, because of that, it's really important to listen to the partner and family around them. So often we find that partners look back and think that they knew that something wasn't quite right at the time, but they just couldn't put their finger on it. They knew that their partner was out of character, this wasn't normal for them, but they just couldn't quite understand what was going on, really. So we've also done some work looking at those early signs and symptoms in APP, and what we found is that people can report and pinpoint exactly when they think their postpartum psychosis first started. And those early signs and symptoms might look like feeling very active or energetic. You can see the list in the middle of this slide here. Very chatty, talking, always on the phone, busy mind, racing thoughts, lots of different ideas, writing lists, doing lots of projects that they might not have done before. Lots of confusion and muddled thinking, feeling a bit disorientated and surreal, no need for sleep or not being able to sleep, so their mind just not switching off really. And then other things like feeling anxious or feeling in a kind of detached or surreal world. So lots of different signs and symptoms that are difficult to distinguish from those first kind of few days after giving birth. But I think one of the things that we say is to look out for these kind of symptoms in people that are at higher risk. But also, is this normal for this woman? It might be that they're chatty and sociable and always on the phone, but it might be that they're not like that and they're kind of showing signs of that kind of manic state. So just to kind of monitor these signs and symptoms, really. So I guess if you see these kind of symptoms, what do you do with that? So NICE and the Royal College of Psychiatry suggest that if postpartum psychosis is suspected, so if you see these signs and symptoms, that ideally a woman should be assessed urgently within kind of 4 hours. So that will either be by a perinatal team or a crisis team if they're at home, or by a psychiatric liaison team if they're in emergency department or maternity. And so I guess for you, really, it's knowing what those kind of referral pathways look like. So where are the perinatal team? Where are the mother and baby unit teams near you? It might be, as I said, that you need to involve the crisis team if they're in emergency department and maternity, or if it's out of hours for perinatal teams. And sometimes you might have to advocate for your patient there, because referral criteria can look quite different in postpartum period. It's very urgent and needs to be people need to be admitted very quickly. We often say that kind of emergency departments and ambulance and police are sometimes involved at home with families, particularly if it's got to the point where things have escalated. So that might be, it's not the best route for people with postpartum psychosis, but it might be kind of last resort. People need to present in the emergency department. But I think the key messages here really are that pick up the phone and arrange help if you're worried about a woman. Keep that woman and child safe, and ideally don't leave the family to supervise. So, if you suspect postpartum psychosis, then don't wait till tomorrow. That referral needs to happen straight away, really. So, and I guess just another point here is it's obviously not your role and job to try and diagnose. It's very much about getting that help, that specialist help, as soon as possible. So. Okay, so just in terms of kind of management then, so ideally a woman will be admitted to an inpatient mother and baby unit. So these are specialist inpatient mental health units where a mum can be admitted with their baby and recover. And they have a very multidisciplinary team around them, lots of nurses, nursery nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, and there's lots of things involved in that recovery. So that might be medication, psychological input, practical help with kind of caring for the baby, health visiting, midwifery, specialist perinatal mental health team on discharge, and lots of peer support as well. And not forgetting the kind of family and friend networks as well. So lots of different kind of care involved in someone with postpartum psychosis. We've done some work looking at the outcomes, like kind of care outcomes in people with postpartum psychosis. And you can see here on this figure that we found that care outcomes are much better when people are admitted to a specialist mother and baby unit. So just over the last kind of 10, 15 years, we can see that care for postpartum psychosis in the UK has improved generally, which is great. So we looked at things like satisfaction with care, feelings of safety, feeling informed about the illness, support with recovery, their kind of level of recovery at discharge. And that was all better over the last kind of 10, 15 years, which is great news. And we also found that mother and baby units had much better care outcomes than general psychiatric units. So we know that the place to be is in a mother and baby unit so people can get better with their baby. So. In terms of recovery from postpartum psychosis, so we find that recovery is very individual. So people may stay in a mother and baby unit or an inpatient unit anywhere between kind of a few weeks to a few months, but it can take a long time to recover after that. So we found anywhere between kind of 6 months up to 3 years and more, depending on the individual. It's very non-linear, so people can go back and forward in those kind of recovery journeys. The initial psychosis, so the acute psychosis, which lasts kind of a few weeks to a month, can often be followed by other mental illness. So, for example, about 50% of people will then go on to develop depression. Lots of our women will have anxiety, lots of low confidence, low self-esteem, lots of guilt around everything, and lots of self-stigma and kind of perceptions of other people worrying about that as well. So lots of recovery and emotional recovery and psychological recovery from it as well. And then just from some of the surveys that we've run in APP, we've found that in the 12 months after discharge from an inpatient unit, about 30% were readmitted to hospital. So that's not necessarily from psychosis. It might be due to depression or other illnesses. And then around 50% had suicidal thoughts. So even in that year after, people are still having those thoughts whilst they're recovering. And about 15% have made suicide attempts. So just highlighting that kind of longer recovery from the acute psychosis, really. And then in the long term then, the psychological recovery from postpartum psychosis is about coming to terms with what's happened. You know, it's a huge thing, often ending up in inpatient care, trying to make sense of the experience, whether that's the thoughts and the psychosis. working to some kind of normal return to life. I don't know how normal things are after having a baby, but on top of the kind of, mental illness, that kind of return to what was life looked a little bit like before. Understanding relapse risk. So it might be that some people will go and relapse a few times in their life or in future pregnancies. Some people may never relapse, or some people may have problems around the menopause as well. So it's just understanding for that individual what that might look like. And then we know that it can have a huge impact on dads and co-parents and the wider family. We've reported quite high relationship breakdowns. Now there's much better support around the family. That's probably less, but it has a huge impact. The partners and the family see everything that happens, and it can cause huge trauma in the family. So making sure that they're supported as well is really key to recovery. So I think I've talked for long enough, and I guess the recovery side of things brings me nicely onto Jenny. So I'm just going to hand you over to Jenny because she's going to talk about her journey and her recovery from postpartum psychosis. So.
Thanks, Sally. Good evening, everyone. So yes, my name's Jenny, and as Sue said, I'm one of the National Peer Support Coordinators at Action on Postpartum Psychosis. So like most of the amazing people who work for APP, what led me to become involved with the charity was my own experience of postpartum psychosis. I'm going to share some of that experience with you, what it was like for me, the support I had, and what helped me to recover. This is my story, but it's important to say that everyone's experience is unique. Presentations of PP will vary. Some cases will be obvious, others more difficult to spot. I hope hearing some of my experience will be helpful to you to look out for the signs and get help for families when needed. So I gave birth to my first son at the end of May 2012. As I said, he's just turned 14. I had a good pregnancy. I really enjoyed being pregnant. We went to both NHS and NCT antenatal classes, and I went to breastfeeding workshops as well. I was determined to exclusively breastfeed. Breast is best. This became a fixation for me in the days and early weeks after giving birth. Expectations versus reality were very different. The birth itself was pretty straightforward. I went into labour just after 4 p.m. on Monday afternoon. I'd watched the Olympic torch go past with my best friend earlier that day, and contractions started about an hour after he left. We went into the midwife-led unit in the early hours of Tuesday morning, and my son was born at 1:20 p.m, a bit squashed looking, but safe and healthy. I felt battered, but I'd done it. I think lack of sleep was a major factor for me becoming unwell. You don't expect to get much sleep with a newborn, but no one can prepare you for it. And especially as a first-time mum, you don't know when what you're experiencing is no longer normal. Same with anxiety. I'd lost a night to labour, and now the sleepless nights continued as I seemed to be feeding constantly. The next 3 weeks were a blur of feeding, nappy changes, and increasing exhaustion. Then the evening crying set in and my anxieties grew. I went to a meetup of our NCT group. I remember one of the others asking me, "Is that his hungry face?" I had no idea. How did I not know my own baby's hungry face? I'd avoided baby books and online advice until now. But now I was scouring Mumsnet and other websites while feeding at night, trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. I was sure I was getting it all wrong. There was way too much information and contradicting advice that just added to my confusion. When the midwife or health visitor came to visit, though, I pulled myself together and tried to show how well I was doing. Insomnia hit at the 3-week mark. I could no longer switch off at all. My mind was racing and my thoughts and behaviour started to get strange. In the night, my baby would grow before my eyes as I fed him, but be back to a tiny newborn in the morning. I became more and more fixated on the feeding and that I must be doing it wrong. In trying to interpret his feeding cues and recognise his hungry face, I started to believe I could communicate with him. I started to refuse to feed him as I didn't believe that's what he was telling me he wanted. I was so tired and confused. I'd started to think I needed help, but I would then change my mind. I just needed reassurance and sleep. It was a Saturday when my husband did call for help. He was getting very concerned. He called the maternity unit and happened to speak to someone he knew who advised him to call the GP out of hours service. I heard him tell them he was worried I couldn't safely feed our baby. I couldn't believe I was failing so badly so soon. The midwife called back and said to bring me into the maternity unit. I talked around in circles to a midwife and later a paediatrician while my baby slept peacefully in his car seat. They reassured me and sent me home, advising a hot bath and a Horlicks. Before we left, the paediatrician did ask me if I was seeing things that weren't there. I said no. I slept a little and had a vivid dream that I was sleeping in a cave, my baby next to me. I woke up and declared, "I've cracked it. I just need to feed him every 8 hours for 3 hours. It's all about the maths." My husband tried to get me back to the maternity unit. I was a state, dishevelled, leaking milk, pacing and muttering, "I'm missing it." This was because I'd fixed on my first belief that babies only grow up when you're not watching them, that if I constantly watched my baby, he'd stay a baby, that I couldn't sleep, as if I did, he'd grow up and I'd miss it. But by being in the state I was missing it anyway. I believed all mothers had to come to this realisation, but that everyone else got it and accepted it straight away. But I couldn't and was trapped in a kind of loop, muttering and talking round and round in circles. Back at the maternity unit, I paced and I spiralled. A mental health nurse came to see me and told me of a place I could go where they could help me and where they did things a bit differently. I agreed, still sure I just needed someone to spend a day with me and reassure me I was doing things right. I could see the concern on people's faces when I spoke to them, but I also saw winks and nods of understanding when no one else was watching them, those who were mothers and knew what I was struggling to accept, because they'd all been there too. Every bit of rest seemed to make things worse, and I started to detach from reality. I'm not clear what happened in what order over that evening and night, but there was a moment when something switched and I was gone, my mind lost. So many thoughts and beliefs were racing through my mind. I think to those looking on, I was motionless on the bed, but inside my head, I was creating a whole new world. I'd hear a bird, I'd created it. I'd hear a car going past, I was creating technology. I was still on the postnatal ward hearing babies cry. I was having all the babies. I was Mother Earth. I heard people saying they'd underestimated me. My maternal urges were so strong. Most mums stopped at 2 or 3, but I was keeping going. I was the chosen one. I didn't know what terrible thing was going to happen if I stopped, but it would be terrible. The next morning, I was transferred to Brockington Mother and Baby Unit in Stafford. Time was shifting and confused. I was in and out of being aware of what was happening. At the Mother and Baby Unit, in different surroundings, my thoughts and beliefs shifted, very linked to science fiction books, films and TV programmes, then more abstract. I was colour, I was language. When later told I had puerperal psychosis, it made perfect sense. I was purple. Nothing made sense to me, but I saw meaning in everything. People's names, the posters on the walls, everything became a code to crack. To start with, I wouldn't open my eyes, but when I did, again, everything I saw I had created. When a cot appeared in my room, this seemed very significant. Did I have a baby? Was I the baby? Had my baby died, and this madness was my grief? My husband left me on the first evening, staring at the clock on the wall, twitching my head to the left, so convinced that I could turn back and control time. I think this most acute stage of my psychosis only lasted for a couple of days. I responded quickly to medication, but it knocked me flat. The days that followed were filled with fog and confusion. It was like Groundhog Day. I didn't really recognise my baby, but I knew he was important. Everything became a test. The medication made me slow and stiff. I thought I'd turned into my nana. Conversations from the past, real or imagined, had all led me here. This was my job and my destiny. As my delusional thoughts started to settle, confusion and paranoia remained. I believed I was part of a social experiment and everyone else in the unit was an actor. I was convinced there were cameras everywhere. Everyone was talking about me and laughing at me. I was the centre of some horrible joke. At the same time, I was a new mum. As the days and weeks went on, changing a nappy and making up a bottle were a source of despair. My husband was the one person I trusted, and he assured me it was safe and important to keep taking the pills they were giving me. Gradually, things improved. My first bit of leave home made a big difference, as I knew my mind couldn't reconstruct that whole journey between the mother and baby unit and home. I was discharged home exactly 1 month after being admitted, a relatively short mother and baby unit stay. I see it as quite a short, intense experience, and luckily I didn't go on to experience a depression afterwards. Many women do. Despite being a short episode, it did have a profound effect on me, and it did take time to recover. Back home, I struggled with low confidence and anxiety. I needed constant reassurance, but was also determined to appear okay, so very much played at being okay until things finally caught up. There was no perinatal mental health team in my area at the time, so I was under the CMHT. I saw a psychiatrist every couple of months and had regular visits from a care coordinator where I would just try and show how well I was doing. I was lucky to have very supportive family and friends. I worked in the NHS at the time and was lucky to also have very supportive and understanding colleagues. It was a bit later that I realised I wanted and needed to talk about what I'd experienced. I wasn't offered any counselling, and when I asked if this might be helpful to me, was told by my care coordinator that maybe it would be better just not to think about it. My sister found action on postpartum psychosis when researching online. I didn't look at the information straight away, but when I did, and when I joined APP's online peer support forum the following year, it was such a relief to realise it wasn't just me. I started replying to people on the peer support forum and found writing about my experience and reading other people's stories very cathartic. I went along to an APP volunteer event in 2014. I can't tell you how amazing it was to meet others who'd experienced something similar, both virtually and then in real life, to feel understood and validated. I met Professor Ian Jones, APP's chair at the time, at the volunteer event too, and asked about the risks of having another baby. I got referred to his second opinion clinic, and my husband and I travelled to Cardiff, and I spoke about my experience in detail to a healthcare professional for the first time. It took another year of weighing things up, but we decided to try for another baby. It was a very different experience this time. My risk of having PP again was put at around 50%, but being aware of this and being supported made a huge difference. There was still no perinatal mental health team in my area, but I was under consultant-led care antenatally with outreach from the MBU team. I had great support and understanding from my GP, midwife, and health visitor. Reading and learning from other people's experiences through APP was again a huge source of support for me. We planned for the worst and hoped for the best. I opted not to breastfeed after the initial feeds after the birth, both to help prioritise sleep, but also to avoid it becoming a thing again. I took a low dose of quetiapine after the birth for 6 months and had help with the night feeds for the first few weeks. There were anxious times, of course, but I stayed well, and for me, having a second baby was a positive and healing experience. I spent a long time feeling that I'd had PP because I couldn't cope with the lack of sleep, but it was due to some weakness on my part. Finding APP and reading other women's stories and having the time and space to share my own helped so much with this. It can happen to anyone, and there's no one thing to put it down to. I'm also very aware of the great care I had. I was picked up early due to my husband seeking help and was in a hospital setting when I spiralled into psychosis. I was in a mother and baby unit the following day. I had good support, good networks of support around me, and like I said earlier, was fortunate to avoid further episodes of mental ill health during the recovery. Not everyone is this lucky. I really feel that understanding of the illness, connection with others who have been there, and lots of support from professionals, family and friends is crucial. I also feel very strongly that no one should feel alone through this illness. Recovery is absolutely possible. I hope I help to give that hope to others now. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all of you for everything you do to support mums and families, and everything you will do to support them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. And I think, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think everyone will agree that was incredibly powerful to hear the journey from the beginning and through to the end. And we do that to to give you an insight of what it's like to go through it, really. And that's I'm sure that, well, I know that's a very condensed version because of time, and you could go on for hours and hours. So thank you for sharing that in such a powerful way. So thanks, Jenny. Do we have time to carry on for a little bit? I think we do, don't we? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I will just finish on very quickly then on what. No, okay. Well, we could go on for hours about what APP offers, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about what our charity does. So we were very lucky last year to win an award, the GSK Impact Award winner. So that's where charities work very closely with the health sector. So I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We're a true collaboration really with academic experts, specialist clinicians and families with lived experience. And we've got over 1,000 members who have experienced postpartum psychosis throughout the UK and beyond, really. And we've got over 4,000 forum users, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. We've got lots of information on our website. Again, we've put that in the resources. So lots of information for parents, but also for health professionals as well. And lots of guides to help people through postpartum psychosis. We offer peer support, so that was our main kind of thing that we offered when we started as a charity. We've got lots of different routes for that. So we have an online peer support, which is manned by trained peer support staff and volunteers. And that's where anyone that's affected can go on and ask questions. And there was lovely supportive replies there. And that's what myself and Jenny both found in the first instance for APP. And then we have one-to-one peer support service. So that's where people are matched with people with similar experiences, and they kind of support people through whether it's email or video, phone call, or in one-to-one in person as well. And then we have on the ground face-to-face peer support workers within the NHS, and we offer lots of different cafe groups. Some of those are in regions across the UK and some of those are online. And I guess just the power of peer support. I mean, Jenny has demonstrated that through her story, but same for me. Reaching out was an absolute lifeline. I was signposted to secondary specialist care, and that was where my kind of recovery started, really. So it really is life-saving, and people feel they become part of this amazing community of people that have been through something similar. So these are all the different things that we offer nationally. So we have lots of different cafe group spaces online. We have Partners Cafe Group for dads and co-parents that have been affected by it. We've got different spaces like a neurodiverse group. We've got a creativity sharing group, and we have Black Mums group and Muslim cafes group. So just lots of different spaces there for people to connect. Obviously, anyone is welcome to any of our UK cafe groups, but these are just different spaces for people to connect. We have Shahida and other staff and volunteers working on our Diverse Communities project. And that's because what we find is that anyone can be affected by postpartum psychosis. So it's the same prevalence across, any cultures. But often we find barriers in accessing care, and often people are have a slightly different pathway of care, particularly in Asian and Black mums, and often they will be later down in their journey and it can be quite traumatic for them. So just making sure that we have an outreach project to make sure that we reduce those barriers in terms of accessing care. We also have support for bereaved families. So unfortunately, we do support families that have lost mums to postpartum psychosis. So we've got lots of information on the website and focus groups and support for bereaved families as well. So I talked about the partnerships within the NHS. So this is where we work jointly with NHS teams and mother and baby units in the community to provide peer support within those NHS trusts. And we do lots of raising awareness. So we work with lots of different organisations to try and get the message out there, in terms of what postpartum psychosis is and how people can be treated. Campaign for better services across the UK, so to make sure that everyone has access to the services that they need. And these are just some examples that we've been working on. So we've campaigned a lot and raised a lot of awareness in the media about about the mother and baby units in Wales. So we now have one in South Wales and one on the border in Chester for North Wales. And then we're also campaigning for a mother and baby unit in Northern Ireland. So just making sure that everyone has access to the care that they need. We run lots of different talks and training like tonight. So we partner with lots of different organisations to make sure that we deliver training about postpartum psychosis to lots of different health professionals. And this is just something that's coming up in October time. So we run a yearly webinar, which is essential knowledge for preventing maternal suicide. So this QR code, if you scan the QR code, that'll take you to the booking website. And that's just aimed at all health professionals that might come into contact with expectant parents. And we rely heavily on fundraising. So lots of our projects are, funded through fundraising by our incredible people that have fundraised for us. So, and I'm going to stop talking there, but I just want to say a massive thank you for listening to us and listening to Jenny's story, and a massive thank you for everything you do for families affected by postpartum psychosis. So thank you very much. So,
I would say a huge thank you, Sally and Jenny, to both of you for actually raising this. I mean, I know you both got stories, and Jenny, thank you. It's such a strong, courageous story, because and it really illustrated, because it you know, as a midwife and as a teacher and as having been a student midwife, you kind of know in the books, but you make it come alive, and you're people who've experienced it, and you're kind of illustrating the difficulties that are going to come up. Because one thing you said, Sally, Jenny, was when you said, well, when the health professional, when the midwife came, I made sure I was, doing everything to look as though I was fine and I was coping. And that, I mean, that's one of the huge things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that was very powerful indeed. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing a lot about this. And the other thing that I'm really feel it must be a huge achievement is increasing the number of mother and baby units, because there was a point at which mother and baby units were almost gone in the UK. And you kind of know that a mother and baby unit is a better place to be when you're having postpartum psychosis, because it's much more mother and baby friendly, obviously. So that's a huge achievement, and well done you. And I think what I'd say to our audience, if you've got some spare pennies, send them to the APPB, or if you want to do a little run in the marathon, that might be on people's minds just now. That would be a good raising of money. So thank you so much. Now I want to say hello to Nepal, Jamaica and New Zealand, and we've got friends from there too. So hello to you, and I hope you've found this useful for yourselves. Now I have a question, and I'm looking over here because that's where the questions are coming through. And we have Awa Hadid, who says, thank you for such an informative talk. May I ask, Sally, if there are studies that have examined a link between postpartum psychosis and an altered gut microbiome? That's a good question.
That is a good question. And I think
it might be quite specialist.
Yeah. The short answer is probably no, because what we find is that we need a lot more research generally in postpartum psychosis. And so at the minute, we have certain studies that might come up with a hypothesis of why it happens. For example, definitely sleep is involved. We know there's quite a big evidence base for lack of sleep and disrupted sleep. We have quite a lot of evidence for the abnormal response to hormones. So not necessarily hormones per se by themselves, but what that means for different people responding to different hormones. And we have quite a lot of work that's been done looking at obstetric factors and kind of birth trauma. So we know that it's not necessarily one thing. So it's not because someone's had a C-section, or it's not because they've had lots of drug intervention. It's potentially a combination of lots of different things. So my short answer is no, there's probably no studies on that because it's very specialist. but there's no reason why it could not be, part of the bigger picture. And we tend to say it's a bit of a perfect storm in terms of the cause of it all. So yeah, short answer, no.
Well, I think it illustrates the way research moves and how our understanding of all these conditions changes over time. Because years ago, people just assumed it was because it was the hormones, that it was the hormones at fault. And of course, our knowledge has increased over the years, hasn't it? So that's a brilliant. I hope that'll do you, Awa. Okay. Bethan Jones. Hello, Bethan. Says, hi, I'm a midwife in the Welsh Ambulance Service and part of the UK maternity leads in all ambulance services. Would be amazing if we could have your details to do an awareness session for ambulance clinicians. There.
Yes,
well, you
definitely.
should have. You've got the
Thank you.
APP. I want to say APPG. It's APP. There's something else called APPG. In the resource, if you look on the resources, you'll be able to contact Sally and Jenny quite easily through there. So thank you, Bethan. And there's a message for Jenny specifically. So Trudy Chambers says, thanks for sharing. She's got little hearts there. And Cheryl says, thank you for sharing your story, Jenny. And then a comment from Emily McLean says, hi, Emily, says, such a powerful talk. Thank you so much. And then Martha says, thank you for sharing. And then she says, how can the MBU help support you with caring for the baby during the acute psychosis? I guess that's understanding what happens if you're there with your baby and whether the baby is with you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very individual, and it depends how poorly the mum is. But what will normally happen is that when mums get admitted to mother and baby unit, there'll be discussions around whether the baby will stay in the room. There's always a dedicated nursery and nursery nurses that will help nurse the babies. It may be that the mother wants to carry on breastfeeding, so they'll help to facilitate that. Or it might be that it's decided that formula is the way forward to help get the sleep. Often in the first few nights, it's about correcting sleep and getting the mum to sleep. So it's a very individual thing, but there was lots of professionals that will help to care for that baby, either with the mum or in the nursery, and the mum will come and visit the nursery. It's all in the same place. So yeah, so very much trying to promote that recovery with the baby. So would you agree, Jenny?
Yeah. So I think for me, my son was in the nursery for three of the 4 weeks I was in the mother and baby unit, and then in with me towards the end as I was kind of preparing to go home and needed to show that I was able to kind of get up in the night and do the feeds. But that support around all aspects of baby care was kind of invaluable, really, because you're so confused, and like I said, trying to make up a bottle and even count the scoops was like this an enormous baffling task. So yeah, really, but so important to have the baby with you and have that contact, because I can't imagine how more confusing it must be if you're there without your baby and don't really know what's happened, and the additional trauma of that. So yeah, wonderful places.
And I guess that, I mean, I think absolutely, Jenny. And I wonder if that adds to the kind of guilt that you could have if you didn't have that contact and you didn't know your baby was being cared for and you could see the baby occasionally.
I was admitted
very anxious
to a general psychiatric unit just because there wasn't any mother and baby units in my area, and it was horrible. It fed into my psychosis about where she was, and I couldn't care for her and I couldn't feed her, and there's lots of trauma associated with that. We know it's better to be with the baby as much as possible if possible.
And I mean the other thing I was thinking as you were talking about, mental health, or mental ill health I should say, does still carry a stigma. And when you were saying 50% of cases are out of the blue, nothing to anybody could be affected, do you think that helps with reducing the stigma? I mean, a lot of your work must be about helping women get over feeling guilty or as though they're strange.
Yeah, I think meeting other mums when recovering, and like I said, finding it wasn't just you, it is an illness. It can affect anyone. Oh, look, these other mums that I'm meeting are completely normal. It does it. It really helps to normalize. It's not normal, but normalizes it, and really helps with the stigma, I think.
Yeah. So it's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
No.
No.
I think that's great. Oh, another question's come through. I've got Jenny Hall. Hi, Jenny. And Jenny says, thank you for such a powerful description. Having cared for women with the condition in the past, it was much easier to recognise changes as we had got to know them in the antenatal period. With current disjointed postnatal practice, what would you like to see midwives or others providing in the postnatal period?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot, the continuity of care. If you know your mum, if you know the patient, and if it's out of the blue, you know that there's something wrong, isn't there? And it's really difficult. I guess it's just some of it is about listening to the family around that patient that you may not have met before, or mum that you haven't met before. And I guess also it's just knowing the pathways of care. It can be really scary, isn't it, if you come across this and you don't know what to do with it. And yeah, and unfortunately you have to sort of advocate for your mum sometimes, which is quite difficult. If you know there's a gut feeling there that something's not quite right, and you have to advocate to get that help. So I think it's a combination of those things. I don't know if that's quite answered your question. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Jenny. So
I think Jenny, did you have anything?
Just thinking, if you're visiting a mum that you don't really know, is get to know her as much as you can get to know her, but really maybe asking questions, and particularly around sleep, and asking again. I think it's really hard because like I say, and a lot of mums I'm sure are the same. You try and show that you're doing things well because you don't want to, you feel like you're failing, and you want to look like you know what you're doing and you're doing a good job, and that must be so hard as a healthcare professional to then know what's actually going on behind that. But maybe just thinking about what questions to ask that just probe a little bit further might help, but difficult.
Yeah, but looking beyond the perfect mum that the mum's trying to be. I think that was a very powerful comment of yours, Jenny. It really resonates really well. I've got Awa's asking another question. And she says, when you were confused, what helped you ground yourself in the process of recovery? Gosh, you're into big questions here. Well done. But that's a big question.
I think I had psychosis for a very long time. So, I spent quite a few months with psychosis. And I spent a lot of time with a clinical psychologist working on being curious about things. So I could tell everybody what had happened. I knew what had happened. I had insight. I knew I had an altered reality. So it's really strange. You have this kind of insight, but things aren't quite right, but you 100% believe it. And so I would be curious. So I would think, okay, it could be that this has happened, or the alternative explanation could be the real explanation. So I spent a lot of time questioning things and being quite curious. In the early days when I was really poorly, nothing really helped, in terms of, exercising or getting out in the fresh air and things like that. I was so poorly. But in my recovery, a lot of the things that I used to do, like exercise and getting out in the fresh air and the sea and the mountains, really did help with my recovery. So, but yeah, that's my kind of 2 bits.
Yeah, that's grand. How about Jenny? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think similar in kind of going back to things that you did before that were kind of your normal for you and familiar. I think that helped. And lots of time with family, lots of reassurance.
That's fun. I mean, that's fantastic. I think the listening is really important, isn't it? And actually asking the family about the mum, whether this is, is there anything you're concerned, is this normal? But then, of course, that's difficult because it can play into the sort of paranoid kind of feelings that some mums might experience. So being very sensitive and very gentle with that. Do you know, we've come to the end of the hour. And this is what I always say about the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. It's the quickest hour in the week. There's no hour like it. And I want to say huge, huge thank you to Jenny and Sally, who've been so fantastic and fantabulous. I can't say, because they're sharing huge experiences that have come alive for me again once more, and really make things very real. And I think they've underlined, and Jenny in her last question also underlined, the difficulty that we have if you don't have that relationship with the woman. So you really need to get that relationship quicker, and you need to hold on to that. And we need better models of care, so we really get to know the women and their families and really be able to pick up more easily and quickly for the future. So, but thank you to Jenny and Sally who've helped us on our route. This is fantastic. Now, I'm going to say a thank you to Angelo. Now, he's been in the background making sure this is all recorded so you'll be able to access it and maybe play it again and maybe share it with colleagues, because I think that there is a lot to learn, and you'll remember certain things, but you might want to remember even more, even better. And Paul, thank you to Paul for putting the questions through to us on the Facebook. Now, next week, we're going to look at midwifery research, and we're going to have Claire Singh, Jenny Cunningham and Judith Field from the RCM. So take care of yourselves. Drop in next week, same time, same place, and we'll be here. And in the meantime, take care, big time.
Thank you.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with